every time they file an indictment, we go way up in the polls. We need one more indictment to close out this election. One more indictment, and this election is closed out.
There's an airport right up the road. Why isn't that being used? There's an ocean front 20 feet from our lobby. Why are we not using that?
If Trump and Biden are the nominees, it's very likely that no labels will get access to the ballot and will offer an alternative. And, if most of the voters don't want A or B, we have an obligation to give them C.
Hello, I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. We are just days away from the first Republican primary debate and former President Donald Trump's likely surrender in Atlanta following his fourth indictment. And a new CBS News poll finds he continues to hold a commanding lead over his rivals. Our new poll finds 62% of likely Republican voters support the frontrunner, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, in a distant second at 16%. The rest of the field polling in the single digits. And in a social media post, Trump now says he will skip the primary debates, including the first one this week. For more on this, CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins us. Anthony, always great to have you with us here on America Decides. This poll shows Trump way ahead. If a rival camp is assessing it, is there any room for them to make some gains in the coming weeks?
Yeah, look, I'll add this. That's his largest lead so far in our polling. It's not just big, it's bigger than it's been. Here's what's underpinning that, Bob, and it'll start to answer your question. First of all, following the indictment, you get this support among his voters saying that is a reason, among many, that they continue to support him, right? That indictment, they want to show him support. That's one reason. But I think there's another dynamic here, and that is, who do they believe in all of this? And that answer for Trump voters is Donald Trump. When we ask generally, who do you trust to tell you the truth, things that are accurate? Donald Trump comes out on top for primary voters who are backing him, even higher than their friends and family, frankly. Now, why is that? I think you have to juxtapose it against what they see as the system, the political system, which they overwhelmingly feel is corrupt. Now, they're not alone in calling it dysfunctional, too, but it's that Donald Trump set against what they feel is a corrupt system that then turns him, in their minds, into the honest broker here. In fact, he's winning among voters who say that a candidate being honest and trustworthy is very important. So that's how it all comes together, and that's how this dynamic shapes as these indictments start to come down, Bob.
The consequences of this new information, your assessment, could be really stunning long-term in the Republican presidential race. So many rival campaigns of Trump, they tell me behind the scenes that they believe if Trump ever is convicted, whether it's on a federal level with the special counsel or in Georgia, that a conviction could be the thing that keeps Republican voters early in 2024 from giving Donald Trump their vote. But based on this new CBS News poll, it doesn't seem like voters may be even swayed by a conviction.
You know, one thing I'd add there, Bob, because that's interesting reporting, is that he is seen as the most electable, too, in the general election by these Republicans. So to your point, if that were to happen, would that put a dent in something that's very important to Republicans, which is that electability measure? That remains to be seen. But right now, after all of this, they still think he can beat Joe Biden.
Anthony, what about the attacks on Trump from the right? Florida Governor DeSantis has been doing that for months on the campaign trail. Does Trump have any vulnerability based on your polling from conservatives that he's not conservative enough?
So here's a couple of things. One is a hurdle that these candidates have to get over, and it's this lopsided number, 91% to 9%, where the voters say they want the candidate to make the case for themselves if they're not Donald Trump, not make a case against Donald Trump. That helps buttress him, right? And then the other thing is, okay, so we ask people who aren't supporting Donald Trump, and obviously they're in the minority right now, why are you considering some of these other candidates? That would include Ron DeSantis. This big number comes up just keeping their options open, waiting to see the debate for just under half of them, less so that Trump is controversial, less so that they're concerned about Trump's legal fights, right? So to answer your question, those candidates, I think, voters are saying, okay, tell me something about you. Tell me why you are a viable alternative, and less so about attacking the former president, Bob.
That's really interesting, Anthony, because so many of these candidates behind the scenes ahead of this debate, they keep telling CBS News they want to focus on their own message. They don't see any upside for going against Donald Trump. And it appears the polling backs up that strategy to some extent.
Yeah, and, another potential opening, or at least an opening in the political marketplace, is the economy. Right? We often come back to that. Republican voters are not alone in wanting to know what a candidate's plans are for lowering inflation. Things that will help, reduce interest rates, all of that. They tell us they want to hear those policy plans. And to date, they don't think there's been enough policy in this campaign. So maybe that's an opening in the debate for them, Bob.
We'd welcome more policy discussions anytime. Anthony Savalento, thank you so much for your excellent polling and analysis. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
President Biden heading to Maui to survey the damage from those terrible recent wildfires. He is expected to meet with the first responders and survivors of the fire, which broke out earlier this month. The president is set to speak there about the more than 100 people who died. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us now from the White House. Scott, thanks for being here. An important visit for the president. Hawaii and much of the country continue to reel, and as they watch the images and learn more about what has happened, what do you hear the president will say to the families and those affected?
We asked the FEMA administrator what the president hoped to accomplish by joining her today in Maui, and she told me he needs to better understand the impact of this tragedy by seeing it in person. That seeing this singular, horrific thing in person really is quite something, a catastrophe of unparalleled scope and size in American history. We also know this, that the needle has to be thread by any politician, any president responding to a massive catastrophe. You don't want to dislocate or disrupt the responses, but you also don't want to stay away and appear sluggish or disinterested. The president's there today, seemingly at a spot where he won't be disrupting any of the response at the federal or state level. But Bob, ultimately, the president's going to underscore the breadth of the response here. It is federal money that is helping to house some of those dislocated. They need to bring in federal agencies to stop some of the air traffic, to help responders, to help provide food, nutritional assistance to the families there who need food and who need services. This is a breadth of scope of government we haven't seen to a natural disaster in quite some time.
Scott, speaking of the scope of everything here, you're up on Capitol Hill as a congressional correspondent, keeping close tabs on what these lawmakers are up to, even though they're on summer recess. What's going on Capitol Hill to talk about funding for disaster relief, if anything?
This is an emerging issue, Bob. FEMA is running short on money. They get money in the fiscal year system, which means money runs out September 30th of each year, and they're running low after all these disasters and all of their responses. They're going to need Congress to pass new emergency funding to refill the Disaster Relief Fund, the so-called DRF. President Biden has asked for $12 billion to do just that, so that FEMA doesn't have to scale back its efforts responding to some of last month's disasters, like the flood in Vermont and the flood in the Hudson Valley of New York. But Congress, at this moment in time, Bob, as you well know, is not a reliable source of funding for anything. There is a gridlock that paralyzes this particular Congress, which makes even the easy asks, like disaster relief funding, uncertain. That's going to be the story that defines the rest of this month here in Washington.
Scott MacFarlane, thank you. We appreciate your reporting. And we may be barreling toward another Biden-Trump rematch come next year. And if that's the case, No Labels and their honorary chairman, Larry Hogan, say it's possible. They'll put forward another ticket, a third-party ticket on the ballot. We'll speak with Governor Hogan next. You're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Former President Trump says his lead is so big he won't participate in Wednesday's Republican primary debate or any debate in the coming months. Joining us now to discuss this is former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan. He's also the honorary chairman of No Labels. Governor, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
So, Governor, let's begin with the debate. Former President Trump not showing up. You thought about running for president. You spoke with CBS News months ago about your decision not to seek the Republican nomination. For those who have decided to seek it, what are they facing now on that debate stage without Trump there?
Well, it's what I was afraid of, and you and I talked about this in the spring when I decided not to run. I was concerned that Donald Trump was going to suck all of the oxygen out of the room, that all of the attention was going to be on him, and that it was going to be hard for all of the other potential candidates to get any attention or to get any traction. And unfortunately, that's what it appears as if, that's exactly the situation we're in right now with 11 candidates, and he's, far and away ahead of everybody in the pack. But this debate, even though he's not going to show up, which is, it's not surprising to me that he's going to continue to try to make it all about him. But for the candidates, and there are a number of good candidates running, this gives them an opportunity. There will be eyeballs. There will be people watching this debate. And I'm hoping that they'll get a chance to talk about some important issues and not just spend the whole time talking about Donald Trump. And they can let people know what they're all about and why they're running for president, and let the voters of America, hear that they actually care about the problems that everybody else cares about.
So beyond Trump, put him to the side. What's the biggest debate in the Republican Party right now? Is it on foreign policy and support for Ukraine? Is it on the culture war? Where do you see the fissure inside the GOP?
Well, it's a great question. Look, I think that unfortunately, the battle has been about how do we win over Trump voters and base Republican primary voters, because that's the battle that they're in right now. It's not necessarily the same thing that the average American is concerned about. So I think most people in the country want to hear about the economy. They want to hear about crime in our cities. They want to hear about improving education. They're concerned about the war in Ukraine and how we're going to, what our participation is going to be. There are a lot of important issues out there, but what we're talking about are other things that seem to be, where the focus is with the, culture warrior stuff and actually talking about Trump indictments over and over again. I think it's an opportunity for some of them to talk about the things they care about and why they're running. Like, for example, I think Mike Pence probably has an opportunity to put to rest where he is and what he did on January 6th. If I were Mike Pence, I would put it to the rest of the candidates. What would you have done on January 6th? Would you have abandoned the Constitution? I think Chris Christie's going to prosecute the case against Donald Trump. I think so will Asa Hutchinson, both former U.S. attorneys, both of whom are actually calling Trump out. But the rest of the candidates, I think, have to say, if they're going to challenge Donald Trump, they're going to have to challenge Donald Trump. And they're going to have to say, we talk about a positive, hopeful vision for America and where they would lead the country if they were president. I think Tim Scott has a positive, hopeful message. I think it could be an opportunity for him. I was glad to see my friend Asa make the stage. Doug Burgum. There are 6 of my former gubernatorial colleagues that are on the stage. They're all great governors, but a lot of people don't know who they are. And so I'm hoping they'll get a chance to tell America who they are.
Speaking of governors, there has been a lot of chatter behind the scenes among my sources about whether 2 governors should consider late entries, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp and Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin. You know both of these men. What is the reality of a late entry should one of them decide to seriously consider it in the coming months?
Well, they're both great governors, and I had the honor of serving with both of them and supporting both of them in their election campaigns. There certainly would be good candidates for whatever office they chose to run in. But as I mentioned, we're not lacking candidates. We have 11 other candidates other than Trump. We have 6 of my former gubernatorial colleagues. I'm not sure why we would need 1 or 2 more, or what a difference they would make. But I just don't believe either one of them is going to get in the race. I know there was talk about, well, Youngkin said not this year, but maybe next year, or after he finishes the election in November, he'll see and think about it. The filing deadline for the first states is October 15th. So, we're really running out of time. I think this is a lot of speculation about, things that might happen. What we ought to really focus on is how we're going to actually pick one of the folks that's out there now and lead the Republican Party in a different direction, because I want to get back to winning again. We've lost 3 elections in a row because of Donald Trump, and he's our weakest possible candidate in the general election, even though he's blowing everybody away in the primary.
Let's say Trump is the nominee. Let's close here with a little discussion on No Labels, the group you serve as honorary co-chairman of, national chair. What's the percentage in your mind of a Larry Hogan appearance on a No Labels ticket sometime next year, whether it's in the summer, the spring, or the fall, whether you're the presidential candidate or the vice presidential candidate. How do you see it? I mean, just let's be candid here. What's the percentage chance you could end up on a no labels ticket in some capacity?
Well, I'm not a pundit, and I hate to speculate. I'm a pretty direct guy. I've been involved in this group for about 3 years. It's been around for 13 years. I believe in the basic principles of this organization, which is about putting the country first, about trying to bring people together, about reaching across the aisle and coming up with common sense bipartisan solutions. So I believe that's the organization does a good job of that. I don't know that they're going to run anybody. They're only willing to consider this if the nominees are Biden and Trump, and 70% of the people in America do not want those choices. And that's just a long way off. I mean, my hope, I'm still focused on, I'm not considering, I'm not thinking about, I'm not focused on any kind of an independent run. I'm focused on trying to get a Republican, starting with this Wednesday in the debate, that can win that nomination so we don't have to talk about that.
But just to put a pin in this, have there been even informal discussions between you and Senator Manchin about who would be on a ticket as president and vice president, should it ever get to that?
No, Joe Manchin, Joe's a good friend. I have a lot of respect for him. And I know there's been a lot of speculation about, is this going to happen? Are they going to get access to the ballot? And should they consider a Democrat at the top of the ticket or a Republican at the top of the ticket, depending on, look, I think that's all speculation. What we have to focus on is Joe Biden going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party, and is Donald Trump going to be the nominee of the Republican Party? If they are, then there is a good chance that No Labels will try to put a ticket together. I think 2/3 of the people in America have said they would consider an independent ticket. I think the idea of a unity ticket with a Republican and Democrat running together is not a bad idea. I think it appeals to a lot of people in America who are completely frustrated and fed up with politics as usual. They're disgusted with Washington. And, they really want somebody that's going to take the country in a different direction. We've never been at a point in time like we are right now. So I can't speculate. I know it sounds a little crazy, but you just never know what's going to happen next spring. And we all just keep the door options open and keep taking a look and see where we are. Like, you never know what's going to happen until it happens.
That's so true. I remember sitting down with you just a few months ago. Thought maybe Governor Hogan entering political winter, enjoys some crab cakes in Annapolis, but you're still in the arena. Former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, thank you for joining us. With former President Trump saying, at least for now, that he isn't planning to show up on Wednesday for the debate, we look at the effect of his absence. You're streaming America Decides.
I have no problem with him skipping the first couple of debates. He's been on that debate stage plenty of times.
I have no concerns. Whether he's there or not, I'll be just fine.
I'm still holding out hope that President Trump will come.
I think every one of us that have qualified for that debate stage ought to be on the stage, be willing to square off, answer the tough questions.
Welcome back to America Decides. When the 2024 Republican field gathers in Milwaukee this Wednesday, the frontrunner won't be there. Instead, he's expected to be interviewed by former Fox News host Tucker Carlson. Ashley Etienne and Hogan Gidley join us now. Ashley is a CBS News contributor and the former communications director for Vice President Kamala Harris and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Hogan served as White House Deputy Press Secretary in the Trump administration and also served as National Press Secretary for Trump's 2020 re-election campaign. Great to have you both here. Ashley, how do Democrats see it if Trump doesn't show up? Is it a story? Are Democrats going to be paying close attention?
I think Trump not showing up works to the Democrats' advantage. I think the question is how Pence, Christie, and even Asa Hutchinson's going to handle it. I think the anticipation is that they lean in and reiterate what they've said on the campaign trail, which is that the indictments have merit and that the former president's attempt to overturn the election are disqualifying. So in some respects, it's almost better that he's not there. And so that's a position of the Democratic Party.
Who's the target for most of the candidates on stage if the former president's not there as the front runner?
Well, look, Donald Trump's not going to be on stage, but he is going to be in the room. I imagine a large portion of the first segment will be about Donald Trump. People are going to have to answer questions about him. They hate that, of course, because debates are about creating moments and trying to build momentum around something. And so because he's not there, I think after a certain period of time, they're going to shift into what they would do, how they would govern if they were president of the United States. And so in large measure, I think these people are going to try to run in that lane of I'm Donald Trump's his policies without his personality. but I don't know that they have the ability to climb that rung of the ladder to get close enough to him. Look, all the people you just played, Pence and everyone else who says everyone should be up on that debate stage, I find it hard to believe that if they were up 40 points in polling, they'd want to be on that debate stage. In fact, they'd probably sit the first couple out and see how it shaked out. However, if you're going to get to Donald Trump, you're going to have to go one rung at a time. So you're going to have to ping off each other and try and take someone else out to get that next step, to get close enough to Trump to take him on head-to-head.
Ashley?
No, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens at the debate. I think this is a very important moment for the Republican Party. I mean, the question that I've been asking, even when you and I last spoke in an interview, which is, where do the Republicans draw the line? They'll have to answer that question on that debate stage. Where do they draw the line? The former president's been indicted 4 times on charges that are the most egregious offenses to our national security as well as our democracy. So that's going to be the question. And I'm really curious to see how they're going to handle that particular issue to their advantage, each one of the candidates. I will say this, too, that the Biden campaign anticipates that each of these candidates are going to try to out-MAGA each other, right? And so, that would sort of push them into these subjects that aren't really having great resonance with GOP primary voters, like the woke movement that DeSantis is pushing, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's going to be the question: is they anticipate that these guys are going to go down, become out-MAGA each other, and really, I should say, marginalize independent voters as well as soft Republican voters to Democrats' advantage.
Let's pick up on something Ashley just said. There is a huge divide, according to this new CBS News poll, about how Republican voters see the investigations of the former president and how they see democracy, issues related to January 6th, and how Democratic voters see it. What does that mean for the Republican primary race? But does it have any consequences, in your view, Hogan, for the general election, should Trump be the nominee, if some voters feel the total opposite of how Republicans feel?
Well, I'm not shocked that Democrats feel the total opposite of Republicans, but that's going to be litigated in time. Right now, Republicans have to flesh out who can be the best one to carry forth the mantle of the Republican Party. Obviously, Donald Trump way out in front there, and everyone's going to be jockeying for that position. I mean, the fact is, a lot of these folks are going to point to policies Donald Trump actually implemented. And what they're going to say is, I promise if you elect me, I'm going to do those things. And that very well may be the case. But the fact is, you have a former president who, quite frankly, implemented those policies. So why do Republican voters, why are they pausing over whether we should pick someone else when we know we have a proven commodity in Donald Trump? Obviously, the investigations, the indictments loom large. There are going to be a lot of conversations about that, but that remains to be seen how it would affect a general election. It's going to take some time to get there.
Can I just say this? The one consistent factor across all these polls, there's a lot of talks about CBS poll versus the NBC poll. The consistent factor is that Republican primary voters are still shopping. The majority of them are still shopping. The latest CBS poll shows that 50% of the GOP primary voters are persuadable. So that gives someone a really big opportunity come Wednesday to really lay out this big vision, separate and apart from Donald Trump, lay out this big vision of how they want to move the country forward. The question is whether or not someone can walk the fine line of keeping and sort of peeling away some of the MAGA voters from Donald Trump, as well as making inroads.
There is that opening, and people are looking to hear the case of the others. You do wonder, will Trump pay a political cost for not showing up?
Well, my real question I have yet to answer is, will the person who tries to take down Donald Trump be able to get those voters to coalesce behind them? Because the understanding here is, if you mortally wound Donald Trump and prevent him from getting the nomination, that MAGA base is not going to be on your side. They're going to be angry that you did that.
But it's not the majority.
Well, it's not the majority, but it's a large number you're going to need. It's a good 37%, 32% of the vote that may not turn out for you, that may be angry at you, and then you're going to have problems getting the rest of the voters on your side. Well, and remember, it was Chris Christie, the best murder-suicide in political history. He takes down Rubio. He gets none of his votes. They both went down because of it.
We know Senator Marco Rubio has a bit of a different perspective on murder-suicide. Would not be the phrase he would use. But we could keep this conversation going all night, but we're going to have to leave it there. Ashley Etienne and Hogan Gidley, thanks so much for being here. And that does it for us today. Thanks for watching. You're streaming CBS News.